He secured a first back-to-back victory of the season, held a near 40-second advantage over his title rival at the checkered flag, and snatched the championship lead for the first time since September 2016. Watch this space. Lewis Hamilton is gathering momentum. Compared to the wheel-to-wheel skills he had to utilize in Spa, this was a rather serene affair for Hamilton, but it was all about that stunning qualifying lap. Hamilton cemented his place in the pole record books with his dazzling display in the wet, finding just the right amount of grip and power in an Ayrton Senna-esque effort as he finished more than a second ahead of his Mercedes teammate. Lewis' lap was unbelievable, was the verdict of Mercedes' Niki Lauda. Starting on pole ahead of two young guns, Hamilton then successfully navigated turn 1 before consistently pounding out fastest laps throughout the race, despite having his Mercedes engine turned down. Hamilton has always claimed he relishes being the hunter when it comes to Sundays, but time and time again he has proved he has the maturity and guile to close out races too. With Sebastian Vettel finishing 2 places back, this was about as perfect a weekend as it gets for Hamilton. Hamilton seems in a very happy place, and he drives beautifully when he's in a happy place, said Sky F1's Martin Brundle. The season is turning. And now, to Singapore, rating out of 10. 10. Valtteri Bottas did the job Mercedes needed him to do on Sunday. He was clinical in getting ahead of the two slower cars that started in front of him on the grid and kept the Ferraris behind him to bring up the sweetest of one toss for the team on enemy turf. In fact, the only bother Bottas got from a red car all afternoon was at the start, when Kimi Räikkönen won a wheel-banging contest and got ahead exiting the first chicane. But Bottas, who had disappointed in wet qualifying, wasn't behind his countryman for long and took his revenge with an impressive move at the Parabolica. Mercedes cruised it from there, and, although the mathematics look increasingly likely to ensure Bottas plays a supporting role to Hamilton's title bid against Vettel, the Finn is a valuable and dependable asset in Mercedes' armory. Point rating out of 10. 8.5 off the top of the championship for the first time all season. Sebastian Vettel and Ferrari have plenty to ponder as the European season closes. Vettel had declared Mercedes the favourites for Monza, but he surely wasn't expecting Ferrari to be given such a humbling at home. It was clear they were quicker than us today, accepted Vettel after he finished half a lap behind the cruising Silver Arrows. He had ground to make up at the start after a wretched wet qualifying, but when Vettel moved into third place on lap 8 he was 9 seconds behind race leader Hamilton. By the time of the checkered flag 45 laps later, and that gap was out to 36 seconds, an average time loss of 0.8 s per lap. And in relatively clean air. Yes, some of that time was lost when Vettel missed the chicane, but this was an alarming weekend for Ferrari and their title aspirations. Singapore should be a different story, but the wider momentum is now surely with the reigning champions rating out of 10. 7. Is there a better driver than Daniel Ricciardo on a Sunday at the moment? Hamilton may have something to say about that, but it was another sublime drive from the Australian as he climbed from 16th on the grid to 4th. Had it not been for Red Bull's grid penalties, Ricciardo would surely have been celebrating his 7th podium finish of the season. But starting so low down allowed him to show that he is one of the best overtakers in the business. Ricciardo pulled off 2 stunning moves as he worked his way through the field, first feinting and diving past Sergio Perez at the second chicane before arguably the pass of the day on Kimi Räikkönen sealed 4th place. It wasn't even an overtaking opportunity, Sky F1's Martin Brundle said in commentary. A lunge with a capital L spectacular. 1 for the CV. Ricciardo was also closing by a second a lap on championship leader Vettel as he hunted the final podium spot, but ultimately ran out of laps. The 28-year-old increasingly looks the complete package, and will be in high demand next season in the final year of his Red Bull contract. Point rating out of 10. 10. It was obviously more of a Ferrari problem than a Kimi Räikkönen problem at Monza, but the Finn will still be disappointed with his performance at one of the few F1 tracks he has never won at. Räikkönen lined up ahead of his teammate on the grid and a superb start saw him move past Bottas, but his compatriot stormed back through. And soon, he was moving aside to let Vettel push on for a podium too. What followed was a frustrating afternoon behind a Force India and a Williams, with Raikkonen both struggling to match Mercedes's power on the straights and be aggressive enough with his passing maneuvers. Eventually he made one stick on Ocon through the first chicane, but Raikkonen got a taste of his own medicine soon after as Ricciardo made the former world champion look rather flat-footed. Put simply, Raikkonen was paying for not overtaking Ocon and Stroll earlier in the race. "I was lacking the grip and, really, the pace to do anything," said Raikkonen, who is still confident of a much stronger showing in Singapore. After falling further behind Ricciardo in the standings, he needs 8-point rating out of 10. 6. It is a sign of Esteban Ocon's increasing confidence that he was ruining a missed podium rather than appreciating 6th place after one of the most impressive weekends of his young F1 career. "I'm still hungry for it," said the Frenchman about a top 3 finish, though he did admit he maximized his Force India's performance on Sunday. Ocon, along with Stroll, shone in Saturday's showers to start the race in third and duly took second place off the Williams with a flying jet away and bold move into the first chicane, before holding off at least one Ferrari for much of the early running. Raikkonen did, however, have too much pace on lap 25, but Ocon still held both Williams at bay to comfortably finish best of the rest at Monza, and earned praise from Mercedes chief Toto Wolff in the process. What's more, he is now just 3 points behind Force India teammate Sergio Perez in the Drivers' Championship point rating out of 10. 9. Sunday may not have delivered the result Lance Stroll hoped for, but it was an impressive weekend for the 18-year-old in which he became F1's youngest ever front row starter and answered any remaining questions about his ability. The Canadian displayed his skills in the wet to great effect in qualifying, but he lost out at the start as Hamilton's slightly sluggish start forced him to back off and cede second place to Ocon. His race was then compromised by an uncharacteristically slow pit stop by Williams, while one of his few errors of the weekend in pursuit of Ocon caused a flat spot which forced him into defense rather than attack. Nevertheless, it was an overall solid drive from Stroll and his second best result in F1. "Every opportunity that I have to be in positions that I was today is strategy that I'll learn," he told Sky F1. "I feel like I'm getting better and better," rating out of 10. 8.5. An afternoon where Felipe Massa mixed F1 driving with bumper cars as the Brazilian made contact with drivers on 3 separate occasions. First he touched Sergio Perez on the opening lap, before handing Maximum Verstappen a puncture on lap 3, while contact with teammate Lance Stroll in the closing stages could have ended in tears. Fortunately for the 36-year-old, he escaped serious damage on each occasion and secured his 4th consecutive top 10 finish and a crucial double points finish for Williams in their battle to finish 5th in the Constructors' Championship point rating out of 10. 7.5. After Sergio Perez started the weekend fending off a barrage of questions about his relationship with Esteban Ocon, he will have been relieved to have finished it with a drama-free race and a couple of points. But there are signs that his younger Force India teammate is starting to crank up the pressure, outshining the Mexican in recent races. Perez struggled in Saturday's wet weather, but bizarrely started the race 10th despite qualifying a place back and receiving a 5-place grid penalty. He was always going to find it tough to catch his Force India teammate, especially after picking up some damage at turn 2, while a slow pit stop delayed his charge. Perez still caught the Williams on the final lap and would have expected to pass both if he had a few more laps, but has to make do with 2 points, which just about keep him 7th in the driver's standings rating out of 10. 7. On the other side of the Red Bull garage, Maximum Verstappen's luck shows no sign of changing. What should have been a front row start ended up being 13th after penalties, and being in the midfield put him in danger of contact. And lo and behold, after a brilliant start which had moved him up to 8th, Verstappen saw his race compromised on lap 3 as a coming together with Massa left him with a puncture and at the back of the field. The 19-year-old still had the chance to get his elbows out, however, scything through the field and having forceful battles with both Haas drivers on his way to securing a point. Verstappen was relieved to have at least avoided a 7th DNF, but will hope things finally start to go his way in Singapore point rating out of 10. 8. So near yet so far for Kevin Magnussen as the Dane missed out on a points finish in the closing stages after spending much of the race in P10. The Haas driver had done well to see off the initial threat of Nico Hülkenberg and Daniel Kvyat, but ultimately did not have the pace to hold off Verstappen's charging Red Bull with 7 laps remaining. Magnussen felt Verstappen should have received a penalty after being forced off track by the Dutchman as he attempted to regain 10th, but ultimately admitted 11th was the most he could have hoped for, rating out of 10. 7. Daniel Kvyat's points drought continues after dropping from 8th to 12th on one of the toughest weekends of the season so far for Toro Rosso. The Russian enjoyed an early battle with Nico Hülkenberg, but then found himself holed up behind Kevin Magnussen and having to fend off Stoffel Vandoorne's McLaren, which Kvyat said was alarming. Singapore should suit Toro Rosso better and Kvyat will be looking to repeat his point scoring finishes of the past 2 years, rating out of 10. 6.5. After winning the midfield battle at Spa, Renault weren't at the races on Monza's high-speed straights and Nico Hülkenberg's weekend duty never really got going. The 17 rupees wasn't especially quick in the dry or the wet, and so the engine penalties which both Hülkenberg and Jolyon Palmer collected didn't materially affect their prospects, particularly when so many drivers were in the same boat. After qualifying 12th, Hülkenberg started 14th. And picked up just 1 position in the race. It summed up a fairly uneventful weekend, point rating out of 10. 6. A race finish had previously always equaled a points finish for Carlos Sainz in 2017, but that run came to an end at Monza on a weekend in which he said Toro Rosso's car was neither fast enough on the straights nor in the corners. Out-qualified in the wet by teammate Kvyat, Sainz's race yielded little joy and he came home ahead of only Grosjean and Wehrlein, point rating out of 10. 6. You could argue that Romain Grosjean's race weekend was ended as early as Saturday in Italy, with the Haas driver's qualifying crash not only prompting an extended delay, but also heavily compromising his race as he started dead last. If his chances of points were slim at that stage, they quickly switched to near impossible after he sustained front wing damage when tangling with Ricciardo's Red Bull, and Grosjean ended the race well off the pace in 15th. Would he have had the pace for the top 10 without spinning out in Q1's heavy rain? Magnussen's performance suggests it was a possibility, point rating out of 10. 5. A weekend Pascal Wehrlein will probably want to forget. Slowest of those to complete Q1, the young German then lost 7 places on the opening lap and ultimately was last of the cars to finish, point rating out of 10. 5. Did not finish, while his McLaren Honda car has repeatedly let him down. Fans of Team Radio have rarely been left shortchanged by Fernando Alonso over the past few years, and the Spaniard was at his angry best, or worst, at Monza with Jolyon Palmer this time in the firing line. Punchy? Undoubtedly. But ultimately inconsequential? Yes. That's because the substance of the Spaniard's weekend was that it delivered a 9th failure to finish from 12 appearances this season. McLaren's gearbox was to blame this time in the race's closing laps, but the weekend was a write-off from the moment it was announced Honda would be introducing a new engine and taking another wave of engine penalties. Alonso will await the expected confirmation of McLaren's 2018 engine plans this week with interest, point rating out of 10. 6. Stoffel Vandoorne's side of the McLaren garage usually seems a lot calmer, a bit more serene than his explosive teammates, but even the Belgian was reportedly absolutely steaming after another race retirement following a promising display. People at McLaren have never seen him so cross, reported Sky F1's Ted Kravitz. Vandoorne made it through to Q3 in qualifying and was due to start Sunday's race in 8th before a MG UK shoe was spotted and his whole Honda engine was replaced. It therefore would have been hugely frustrating for Vandoorne when he suffered a similar problem with his new power unit after just 34 laps, ending his afternoon. It's pretty difficult to draw positives from a weekend like this, he admitted, point rating out of 10. 7.5. Marcus Ericsson found himself starting in the lofty heights of 11th, but it proved to be another tough Sunday as Zorba's lack of performance was laid bare. The Swede quickly found himself tumbling down the field and most of his action came from fighting teammate Wehrlein, point rating out of 10. 6. Yet another frustrating weekend for Jolyon Palmer in which he suffered another retirement due to unreliability and bore the brunt of Alonso's race day anger. the Briton once again exited qualifying in Q1 before he renewed his battle with Alonso from Spa early on race day. But he received a 5-second time penalty for failing to hand back position to the Spaniard after cutting the second chicane, something Alonso labeled a joke, and his race was ended on lap 29 by a car problem. Karma was Alonso's verdict, while Palmer was left hoping his first points will come at the Asian Flyways rating out of 10. 5.5 Don't miss the F1 report on Wednesday at 8:30 p.m. on Sky F1 as former Ferrari engineer Pat Fry joins Mark Priestley and Natalie Pinkham to review the Italian GP. If you are using skysports.com, you can comment below to get involved in the debate, but please adhere to our house rules. If you wish to report any comment, simply click on the down arrow next to the offending comment and click report.